You've been waiting by your phone. Again. You told yourself you wouldn't. But here you are. And the worst part? You're not even sure if this person actually likes you. They pull you close, then disappear. They say things that make your heart stop, then go completely cold. And everyone around you is saying, just move on, they don't care. But something in your gut keeps telling you that's not the whole story. What if I told you that the most confusing, frustrating, maddening behavior from an avoidant person can actually be one of the clearest signs that they are falling completely, deeply, terrifyingly in love with you? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is going to completely change the way you see everything that's been happening between you two. Most people spend years misreading avoidance. They think silence means indifference. They think distance means rejection. They think the push and pull means the person just isn't that into them. But here's what nobody tells you. For an avoidant person, love doesn't look like love. It looks like panic. It looks like retreat. It looks like confusion. And if you don't understand that, you will walk away from the greatest love of your life thinking it was nothing. So before you make that decision, before you send that final message or delete their number, you need to hear these 5 signs, because one of them might be happening to you right now. And if it is, everything is about to make so much more sense. Let's get into it. If this is already hitting close to home, drop the word finally in the comments. And if you want more content that actually helps you understand the people in your life, subscribe right now, because we are just getting started. Sign number 1, they pull away right after a moment of real connection. Think about this for a second. You had an incredible conversation with them. Maybe it went late into the night. Maybe they said something surprisingly vulnerable. Maybe there was a moment where you both just looked at each other and something shifted. It felt real. It felt like a breakthrough. And then the next day, nothing. Or worse, they were cold, short with you. Maybe they picked a small argument out of nowhere. And you sat there thinking, what did I do wrong? What happened? Did I imagine all of that? You didn't imagine it. That's the first thing I need you to understand. What happened was real. And here's the painful irony. The pulling away happened because it was real. See, for someone with an avoidant attachment style, closeness isn't comfortable. It isn't safe. It actually triggers something deep inside them, something that feels a lot like danger, not because you did anything wrong, but because intimacy itself feels threatening to them. Their nervous system, their emotional wiring, their entire psychological defense system was built around one belief. Getting close to people leads to pain. So when closeness actually happens, when it's undeniable and beautiful and mutual, their system sounds the alarm and they run. But here's what makes this sign so specific to love. Avoidants pull away from intensity, and they only feel intensity when something actually matters to them. You don't run from things that don't scare you. You don't build walls around things you don't care about. If they didn't feel anything, there would be nothing to run from. The withdrawal itself is the evidence. The fact that they needed to create distance after that moment tells you that the moment meant something. It hit them somewhere real, and that scared them more than they know how to handle. Now, I'm not saying this is comfortable. I'm not saying this is easy to live with. What I am saying is that you need to stop interpreting their retreat as a verdict on you. It's not a verdict on you. It's a verdict on how deeply you are getting to them. Every time they pull away after something real, ask yourself this: what just happened before they ran? And I promise you, if you look closely, the answer will be that something genuine passed between you, something that mattered. And that's not nothing. That's actually everything. The way you respond to this matters enormously. Most people chase at this point. They feel the distance and they panic and they reach out more. They ask what's wrong. They try to fill the silence with words and reassurance. And that actually makes it worse, because now the avoidant doesn't just feel the fear of closeness. They also feel the pressure of your need. And pressure makes them retreat further. The better move, and this is counterintuitive, but it works, is to give them the space without giving them the relationship. What I mean by that is you don't collapse into their withdrawal. You don't shrink. You continue being the person you are. You live your life. You don't punish them with silence, but you also don't beg for their presence. You let them feel the weight of their own choice to step back. And often that's what pulls them forward. Because here's the thing about avoidance that most people don't understand. They are not actually comfortable alone. They just think they are. They've convinced themselves that independence is strength, that needing nobody is freedom. But the moment they create distance from you and you don't chase them, the moment the silence is actually yours too, and not just theirs, they start to feel it. The absence becomes real. And that absence reminds them exactly why they panicked in the first place, because they actually want you there. Sign number 2. They remember everything about you. This one is subtle, so stay with me. Avoidants are famously guarded. They don't let people in. They keep conversations surface level. They deflect personal questions. They give you just enough to feel a connection without ever really handing you the key. So when you notice that they have been paying very close attention to you, and I mean very close, that is not casual. That is not something they do with everyone. That is something reserved for the people who have gotten inside them without them even realizing it. What does this look like? They remember the name of your childhood dog that you mentioned once in passing 3 months ago. They remember that you said you prefer mornings. They remember the name of the city you've always wanted to visit. They remember a specific fear you admitted late at night. They bring it up later casually like it's nothing, but it's not nothing, it's everything. Because the only reason someone remembers the tiny details of your life is because they were listening, really listening, not just waiting for their turn to talk, not just being polite. They were absorbing you, storing you, keeping pieces of you with them. For an avoidant, this is significant in a way that's hard to overstate, because their default is emotional distance. Their default is to keep the world slightly out of focus, to not let things in too deeply. When they start collecting pieces of you without realizing it, when they notice they know your coffee order and your biggest dream and the thing that makes you laugh until you can't breathe, that is evidence that their walls have already been compromised. You're already inside. They just don't know how to tell you that. And sometimes they show it in strange ways. Maybe they send you an article about something you mentioned weeks ago. Maybe they recommend a song that sounds exactly like your mood. Maybe they make a joke that references something only you would understand. These feel like small gestures. But for an avoidant, a small gesture is actually a very large one. Because every time they reach out, every time they offer you a piece of their attention, they are overriding their own instinct to protect themselves. They are choosing connection over comfort, and that takes more courage for them than you might realize. Watch for this. Watch for the moments when they reveal that they've been paying attention, because in those moments they're telling you something their mouth might never say. They're telling you that you matter to them, that you've gotten in, that whatever careful, measured life they've constructed around keeping people at arm's length, you've somehow slipped through. And that is not an accident. That is not coincidence. That is love trying to find a way out through the cracks. Sign number 3. They get irrationally jealous but deny it completely. Oh, this one is so telling, so perfectly revealing, and so deeply frustrating if you don't know what you're looking at. Here is what happens. You mention someone, a friend, a co-worker, maybe someone you've been spending time with, and something shifts in the avoidant's face. Something flickers across their expression. Maybe they get very quiet. Maybe they say something slightly cutting. Maybe they suddenly have to go. Maybe they bring up that person again later, trying to sound casual, trying to sound like they're just making conversation. But there's an edge there, a tension, something that doesn't quite match the relaxed detachment they're always presenting to the world. And if you point it out, if you say, "Are you jealous?" they will look at you like you've grown a second head. They will laugh. They will say, "Of course not. Why would I be jealous? We're not even like that." And then they'll change the subject, and you'll be left standing there wondering if you imagined it again. You didn't imagine it. That discomfort you saw is real. That reaction means something. Jealousy is not a neutral emotion. It doesn't appear in the absence of feeling. You only get jealous over something you don't want to lose. And you only fear losing something if it has value to you. So when an avoidant shows jealousy, even in that muted, disguised, half-buried way that they always do everything, what they're showing you is that they have already staked some claim on you in their mind. They've already placed you in a category that is closer than they're willing to admit. And the idea of someone else having access to you, the idea of someone else being let in by you, that creates a panic in them that they have no idea what to do with. Because here's the thing, to admit jealousy would be to admit that they care. And to admit that they care would be to admit that they want something. And to admit that they want something is to make themselves vulnerable. And vulnerability for an avoidant is the most dangerous place in the world. So instead, they deny it, they minimize it, they wrap it in sarcasm or silence or sudden busy schedules. But the feeling is there. It doesn't disappear just because it's unacknowledged. And you can see it if you know where to look. So the next time you notice that flicker, don't push them to admit it. Don't say, "See, I knew you were jealous." That will only make them shut down further. Instead, notice it for yourself. Let it be information. Let it tell you what they're not yet able to say out loud. Because that jealousy is a window into where they actually stand. And what's on the other side of that window, if you look carefully, is someone who wants you and is terrified of what that wanting means. The key here is not to manufacture jealousy to get a reaction. That's a dangerous game and it will backfire. What I'm talking about is simply recognizing the natural jealousy that arises when you live your full, beautiful, interesting life. When you have friendships and experiences and a world that doesn't revolve around waiting for them to decide if they're in or out. When you are genuinely the person you are and that person is someone others want to be around, an avoidant who is falling for you will feel that. They won't be able to help it. And what they do with that feeling will tell you everything. Sign number 4, they open up to you and immediately shut it down. This might be the most important sign of all, so pay very close attention. Avoidants are not emotional sharers by nature. They have a whole system in place, sometimes built over decades, designed to keep their inner world private. They learned somewhere along the way, usually very early in life, that expressing their needs or their fears or their vulnerabilities was not safe, that it led to rejection or dismissal or being too much or not enough. So they locked it down. They became independent, self-sufficient, the person who always seems fine, always seems okay, never needs anything from anyone. And most of the time with most people they can maintain that. They can keep the mask on, they can be charming and funny and warm and present without ever really letting anyone in. But then something happens. They're with you. And something slips. Maybe you asked a question in just the right way. Maybe the conversation went somewhere unexpected. Maybe it was late and they were tired and their defenses were down. And suddenly something real came out, something they didn't plan to share, a fear, a memory, a hurt, a hope they'd never said out loud before, and for a moment, they were completely unguarded. And then they caught themselves, and you watched them pull back, you watched them laugh it off, or change the subject, or make a joke, or literally say, anyway, that's enough of that. And the door that was just opening swung shut again. And now you're sitting with this fragment of them, this piece of their real interior world, wondering what to do with it, wondering if it meant something or if they regret sharing it at all. It meant something. It meant a great deal. Because here's what happens inside an avoidant when they share something real with you. They feel the relief of it. Just for a second. They feel what it's like to be seen. And then immediately, the fear rushes in. Because being seen means being known. And being known means you have the power to hurt them. And giving someone the power to hurt you is the most vulnerable position an avoidant can imagine being in. So they slam the door. Not because they don't want you to know them, but because the wanting scares them so much that retreat feels like the only safe option. The way you handle these moments is crucial. The wrong response is to dig, to say no, tell me more, don't stop. That pressure activates their defensive system and you'll get nothing. The right response is to receive what they share gently and then let it go. Don't make it a big moment. Don't treat it like a breakthrough that you need to name and analyze and build on right then. Just accept it. Acknowledge it briefly and warmly and then move the conversation naturally. What this does is it shows them that opening up to you doesn't have to be catastrophic, that you won't turn their vulnerability into a weapon or a demand. And slowly, the openings come more often and stay open a little longer, because they're learning that with you it's safe to be real. And when you see this pattern, when you see the open and close, the share and retreat, the moment of honesty followed by the layer of armor going back on, don't despair. That's not rejection. That's someone fighting their own instincts to let you in. That's someone who wants to trust you so badly that they keep trying, even though every attempt terrifies them. That is love doing its absolute best under incredibly difficult conditions. Treat it gently. It's fragile, but it's real. Sign number 5. They show up for you in actions but disappear in words. Here is where people get the most confused. Because we live in a world that has told us love is supposed to be verbal. Love is supposed to be declared. Love is supposed to come with words, with labels, with clear and unambiguous statements of intent. I like you. I want to be with you. You mean something to me. And when those words don't come, we decide the person doesn't feel them. We decide silence equals absence. We decide that what isn't said isn't real. But avoidants love differently. And if you apply the standard template to them, you will miss it entirely. Because for an avoidant, words are risky. Words make things real. Words create expectations. Words can be held against you. Words are commitment and vulnerability and exposure, all wrapped up in one terrifying package. So they avoid them. Sometimes for so long that the person on the other side gives up and leaves. But their actions, that is where the truth lives. That is where you will find everything they can't say. Watch what they do. Watch how they show up. When you are sick, do they appear? Not with a big declaration. Not with a grand gesture, but quietly, practically. Maybe they just happen to send you something. Maybe they check in at the exact right moment. Maybe they show up and say nothing, just sit with you. When you are stressed, do they do something, even something small, that makes your life a little easier? When you mention something matters to you, does it show up in how they treat you, even without you having to ask twice? These are not coincidences. These are choices. Deliberate, considered, effortful choices. Because for an avoidant, doing something for you requires them to first acknowledge to themselves that you matter enough to do it for. And that acknowledgement, even if it never makes it out of their own head, is a form of love. It's love filtered through action because action feels safer than words. It's love translated into a language they can speak without completely losing themselves in the vulnerability of it. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm not asking you to accept a relationship with no words, no communication, no verbal acknowledgement of what you are to each other. That's not a sustainable relationship. That's not something you should just accept forever. What I'm saying is that in the early stages, in the complicated stage where things haven't been named yet, the actions are the data. The actions are what tell you whether this person's feelings are real, whether they're showing up even when it's hard for them, whether they are choosing you even when their instinct is to choose distance. Because when an avoidant acts like you matter, you matter. It's not a game, it's not performance. Every time they do something for you, every time they show up, every time they let themselves stay a little longer or reach out when they didn't have to, they are doing something that costs them emotionally. They are overriding their own protection. And you don't do that unless the person is worth it to you. You don't make yourself that uncomfortable for someone who is just a placeholder. You save that discomfort, that effort, that small brave override of your own fear for the person who has genuinely gotten inside you and refuses to let you forget it. So look at the full picture, not just what they say or don't say. Look at the pattern of their behavior over time. Look at who they become around you compared to who they are with everyone else. Look at whether they are less guarded with you, whether they laugh differently, whether they stick around a little longer every time, whether the distance they create is getting slightly shorter each time they come back, because that's the trajectory that matters. That's the story the behavior is telling. Now, before I bring this all together, I want to say something that I think is essential. Something that a lot of content on avoidant relationships completely leaves out. Understanding these signs is not the same as accepting any treatment you're given. Recognizing that someone loves you doesn't mean you have to wait forever in pain for them to figure it out. You are a full person with your own needs, your own desire for consistency, security, clarity, and those needs are completely valid. They don't make you anxious or needy or too much. They make you human. They make you honest. The goal of understanding an avoidant is not to give you a reason to endure what shouldn't be endured. The goal is to give you information so that you can make choices that are actually grounded in reality instead of in assumption. Because sometimes people walk away from something real because they misread the signs and thought they were being rejected when they were actually being loved in the only way that person currently knew how. And sometimes people stay too long in something that isn't working because they've convinced themselves that understanding equals accepting. Neither of those outcomes is what you deserve. What you deserve is this. You deserve someone who is actively working on themselves, someone who may have an avoidant attachment style, but who is willing to grow, willing to be uncomfortable in service of becoming someone who can actually be present with you. Someone who, when you express what you need, doesn't just pull away permanently, but eventually finds a way to meet you. That process takes time. That process is messy and non-linear and occasionally heartbreaking, but it is possible. People do grow. Attachment styles do shift, especially when the person is with someone who understands them without losing themselves in the process. So here is what I want you to take from this. The 5 signs. They pull away right after a real moment of connection. They remember everything about you with an almost unsettling precision. They show jealousy, but immediately deny it. They open up to you and then quickly shut it down. And they show up in actions when words feel too dangerous. If you are seeing these things, you are not imagining it. You are not making something out of nothing. You are seeing someone who is falling for you and fighting it at the same time. Someone whose love looks like confusion because they themselves are confused. Someone who is trying, in the only way they currently know how, to let you in. What you do with that is up to you, and it has to be. Because your peace matters, your clarity matters, your own heart matters just as much as theirs. You are not just a supporting character in the story of their emotional journey. You are the lead character in your own life. And whatever you decide, you deserve to decide it with full understanding of what is actually happening. Not with confusion, not with self-doubt, not with the nagging feeling that you missed something or that you're crazy for feeling what you feel. You are not crazy. You are perceptive, and now you're informed. And that is the most powerful place you can possibly stand. If any of this resonated with you, if you found yourself nodding along or thinking of a specific person, I want to hear from you. Drop finally in the comments and tell me which sign you recognized most, because I read them. And if you want to keep understanding the people in your life at this level, subscribe right now. This channel exists for exactly this, to give you the clarity that nobody else is giving you. And there is a lot more where this came from. You've been patient enough. It's time to finally understand what's actually going on.